This is Queer Newsweek. I'm Destiny Rogers for qnews.com.au, celebrating 20 years of queer news in 2020. Ellen DeGeneres failed to reverse her decline from Queen of Kind to Queen of Mean when her apology for the toxic workplace culture on her show fell flat this week. Celebrity apologies are now commonplace. So commonplace, there's now a template. 1. Don't make it about yourself. 2. Say sorry. Say it unambiguously. 3. Take responsibility, personal responsibility. 4. Compensate the victim. Say what you're going to do to the people who suffered. And 5. Commit to doing better. So how did Ellen do?
Oh boy, welcome to season 18 of the Ellen DeGeneres Show. If you're watching because you love me, thank you. If you're watching because you don't love me, welcome. I learned that things happened here that never should have happened. I take that very seriously, and I want to say I am so sorry to the people who were affected. I know that I'm in a position of privilege and power, and I realize that with that comes responsibility, and I take responsibility for what happens at my show. This is the Ellen DeGeneres Show. I am Ellen DeGeneres. My name is there. My name is there. My name is on underwear.
Going by the template, that was too much about herself. She said sorry, but it was ambiguous. The buck stops with me variety of apology deflects responsibility. There was no actual mention of the victims. What happened to the people who were bullied, who were subjected to racism, who were fired to going to family funerals? But she did make a commitment to improve, and that's good. Ellen had a choice of apology or damage control, and sadly it seems she chose damage control. Perhaps the biggest problem was the obvious stage management. A celebrity apology needs carefully constructed sincerity. It needs to appear straightforward and heartfelt, but Ellen's atonement was pure Hollywood. You get an apology, you get an apology, you get an apology, everyone gets an apology. There were jokes, canned applause, thank you, a laugh track. All a bit incongruous when there's obviously no live studio audience. Q Newsweek, by the way, is recorded in front of a live studio audience. Some cats sneak out at night and kill wildlife. Others bring home sex toys. Ellen DeGeneres' apology had everything except a song and dance routine. There's no business like show business, like no business she knows. To be fair, there's two issues conflated here. The toxic workplace culture and viewer resentment that the Queen of Kind is not a saint. She's a real live living person. Ellen DeGeneres brought that up herself. She attributed some of her problems to her branding as a be kind person. And she's right. Her staff should not be subjected to racism, bullying, or unfair workplace practice. But daytime television hosts should not be expected to be on 24/7. They're real people. They're not necessarily exactly who they portray on television. We all, well, most of us, behave better in public than we do privately. Daytime television is make-believe, fantasy, bullshit designed to fill some of your day and move some product. If you think what you see on television is real, I'll show you a photo of Kylie Jenner without her makeup. Anyway, rumour has it, to encourage a better team spirit, the Ellen Show will be introducing Casual Eye Contact Fridays. American television network CBS this week dropped contestant Noah Purvis from their show Love Island because he provided dishonest information on an application form for the show, apparently related to his porn career. How the fuck would a porn career disqualify anyone from Love Island? The blurb for the show says, the matchmaking begins as a group of single islanders come together in a stunning villa in Las Vegas, ready to embark on a summer of dating, romance, and ultimately relationships. Looks like porn to me, though admittedly porn without the interesting bits. It's got bare flesh, bad acting, silly storylines. I mean, if someone called a plumber on Love Island and the plumber cleaned more than their pipes, it wouldn't really be a surprise. This couple are getting away from everyone else in a room called the Hideaway, with a red lip-shaped headboard and the word jackpot above the bed. I think we can guess what jackpot refers to. In the old days, movies showed a train entering a tunnel to signify the same thing. Noah Purvis made 2 straight movies and 3 gay movies for Corbin Fisher earlier this year. The latest was released just weeks ago. Viewers speculate it is the gay movies that cause the problem. Love Island is obviously a temple for the lustful worship of all things heterosexual. No mention has been made, however, of the now scrubbed advertisements one of the other contestants was rumoured to have on Rent Men. And we won't be telling you who he is. It's his business. It's a legal job. Sex work is real work. Bisexuality, apparently, is fine on Love Island if it's heard and not seen. As long as there's no video of anyone earning an honest day's pay for a totally legal day's work, they'll live with it. I watched some of Love Island USA, and many of the bits I saw were indistinguishable from gay porn. Here's a guy called Calvin juggling someone's Calvins, and here he is sniffing some Calvins. Ooh. Then we've got these guys. Looks like a casting call for bottoms for a Centurion orgy. And what would this be other than bukkake? We're going to stop while we're ahead. When CBS found out about Noah's porn career, they went into full edit erase mode. But they didn't just do the RuPaul's Drag Race Sherry Pie edit. Remember Sherry Pie? The drag queen cancelled when she admitted catfishing young actors, but cancelled after most of the series had been filmed. The Drag Race editors pulled out all stops to minimise her appearances in the show. Sometimes we barely saw her all episode, then she popped up on the catwalk as the winner. Who the f*** are you? But CBS went much harder on Noah's ass. They did the full religious edit. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. They erased all evidence that Noah ever existed on Love Island. Because of the pandemic, Love Island was not shot on Fiji this year. It's shot on top of a casino in Las Vegas. But apparently, what happens in Las Vegas no longer stays in Las Vegas. A new study conducted in Amsterdam shows a decline in the rate of promiscuity and of some drug use of gay men taking PrEP. This seems contrary to the expectation that gay men would become less responsible in their sexual health with the availability of PrEP. DocQ, Dr. Fiona Bishop, has worked in the field of HIV for many years and prescribes PrEP. Fiona joins us now. Fiona, this would seem to be good news as far as PrEP is concerned.
When PrEP first came out back a few years back now, there were a lot of people who were worried that it was going to mean that everyone would be out having way more sex, and there'd be a huge rise in sexually transmitted infections, and it was just going to see this terrible peak in infections and sexual activity, and people were talking about Truvada whores. So people who were going to go on Truvada so they could go out and have loads more sex and spread around lots of infections, etc. And really, I mean, there's a lot that you could unpack about that. And the first thing I would say is that it's okay for people to be having lots of sex, actually, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. But what this study has shown, and I think that we know this from our own experience with people on PrEP, is that their sexual practices didn't really change all that much. So people tended to do what they were doing before they went on PrEP, They just did it without a fear of acquiring HIV. So this particular study came out of Amsterdam, so it was called PrEP, and they talked about measuring sexual compulsivity, which is, I've never heard that said in quite that way before. I can just imagine someone in Amsterdam talking about sexual compulsivity. And it sounds like some sort of disorder. And sure, there is a disorder where there are people who are driven to have loads and loads and loads of sex, and it's out of their control. But what they were talking about was the idea of people having a lot more sex, like being way more sexually active and feeling compelled to do that because they were on PrEP, and that they would take more drugs and drink more alcohol and generally put themselves at greater risk because they were on PrEP. And what the study found was that, in fact, that didn't really happen. In fact, rates of most things stayed about the same, and there was some drop in some drug use, but not a lot. But really, the PrEP use itself did not promote this massive permissiveness and people going out and, as you say, rooting everything that moved. That's not what happened. People just continued to do what they were doing before.
And so with PrEP, people now have options for how they protect themselves against HIV. They can use condoms, they can use PrEP, they can use condoms and PrEP, basically.
And you know, it won't be that long before there are different types of PrEP available. At the moment, we have the pill a day, and in the not too distant future, we'll have long-acting injections that people can have for PrEP, which is fantastic. So that's something really exciting to look forward to. And the other thing that has made a big difference to the reduction in HIV new diagnoses in Australia is the fact that so many people here who have HIV are on treatment. And when they're on treatment and it's working well and they're undetectable, they can't pass it on. So they're not even infectious. So the idea that you can have sex with someone who has HIV, and even if you're not on PrEP yourself, if they're undetectable on treatment, then you don't have to be fearful.
U equals you. Dr. Fiona Bishop, thank you, Fiona. DocQ. And of course, DocQ returns to Q News magazine, which is on the streets again in mid-October. We took a pause from printing during the pandemic, but we're returning to print this October. DocQ will be back with her regular column. In Vietnam this week, authorities raided a facility where locals said about 345,000 condoms were washed, rinsed, dried and reshaped over a dildo for resale. Condoms, of course, are excellent for sexual health and for birth control, but only new, unused ones. Don't use used condoms. Last week we reported on a tribunal in Canberra, Australia, ordering a radio newsreader to pay $10,000 compensation to trans activist Bridget Clinch for social media vilification. Bridget Clinch joins us now. Bridget, how did all this start?
It's really strange. I had no idea who this character was, although I've since been told by people through social media, like from all over the world, that she's a pretty renowned, and serial, vilifier of trans people. And she's been booted from social media platforms and a piece of work. But I actually wasn't even at the event that sparked all of this. I've been to numerous IWD events, but it was IWD in 2018, where the Brisbane organisers turned out to be pretty hardcore TERFs. And
that's International Women's Day?
Yeah, International Women's Day in Brisbane. And so they were mostly the women's abortions rights campaign people. But for some reason, they just, I'm not sure why, but they went down the TERF path and they started to platform it from International Women's Day in 2018. So because they did that, there was a lot of organisations that were actually in attendance because it was the main one happening in Brisbane. And I was with the Greens at the time. and the Queensland Greens Women's Network and the Queensland Greens immediately distanced themselves from it because, you know, they had candidates and elected members present. So, you know, they don't want to be associated with that sort of, you know, promotion of, you know, anti-trans sort of sentiment. So they really quickly put out a statement without my input. You know, the Queensland Greens Women's Network's perfectly capable organisation. They're quite busy, and they still managed to pump out a pretty quick and accurate statement distancing the Greens from the organisers because they just weren't aware. So I shared that on my page, and there was just this immediate pile on, and that's when Beth Rep and her followers just decided that they were just going to be on my case from that point forward. So, yeah.
She later, after mediation, made an apology, didn't she, which you thought was quite sincere. But then when she posted the apology to Facebook, her followers made over 300 comments, most of them directed at you and most of them offensive, from people who even said they had no idea who you were, but they were still willing to vilify you without knowing. All they knew was your name. They knew nothing about you, but they were still willing to accuse you of some of the worst things you could accuse people of on the planet.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, we did mediate, and you're not really able to discuss, you know, what goes on in mediation. But I mean, as far as sincerity goes and things like that, I thought maybe she'd actually gotten her head around what the issue was, and I thought that going forward she was not going to be a trans ally, but I thought that maybe she'd curb her language, you know, because like I'm opposed to a lot of things in society. I'm a very pro-secular person. I'm opposed to religion in our health and education systems, but I don't go around vilifying religious people. I look at the policy and I look at the actual real statistics and what's going on, and you know, I don't mince words, but there's no need to attack individuals or people, and I think that's something that these anti-trans TERF type people don't understand. They just can't not vilify us. So yeah, when that legitimate apology was posted, I thought, okay, this could be a turning point, and then it just descended into a farce, and then she herself just resumed posting stuff that was, you know, anti-me and anti-trans, and it just kind of went from there. So, you know, my only recourse was to go back and try and get it settled again.
As a consequence of that vilification, Beth Rep now has to pay Bridget Clinch $10,000 compensation, which she has raised through crowdfunding. Thank you, Bridget Clinch. That's Queer Newsweek this week. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Don't forget, Q News magazine returns to the streets mid-October. We're resuming print. Follow us on Facebook. Check out our website, qnews.com.au. Updated daily with all the latest queer news from worldwide. We're here and we're queer.